I've seen it happen so many times. You see a cheap center channel on a clearance rack, you grab it thinking you've saved a few bucks, and then the first night you sit down for a movie the dialogue sounds hollow, the voices feel detached, and you're left wishing you'd spent a little more. That kind of buyer's remorse is what makes me pause before any home theater upgrade, especially when the center speaker is the glue that holds the whole soundstage together. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When you're standing in the middle of the living room, remote in hand, the question isn't just does it sound good, but will it actually work with the rest of my system without making me feel like I'm compromising? That's the hesitation that kept me digging into forums, watching long-form tech reviews, and reading through the handful of user comments that do exist for the Klipsch RC64-3. The consensus is clear: people who already love Klipsch's signature forward-facing, horn-loaded sound tend to be happy, while those hoping a single speaker will magically fix a mismatched setup often end up disappointed. The RC64-3 is a true two-way center channel that leans heavily on Klipsch's heritage. The brand's new 1-inch titanium compression driver sits behind a 9000mm Tractrix horn, a design that's been praised for delivering crisp, articulate highs without the tinny edge you sometimes get from cheaper dome drivers. Pair that with four 6.5-inch cast basket cerametallic woofers, and you get a speaker that can move a decent amount of air for its size. In practice, that means when you're watching an action movie and the explosion blazes behind the main dialogue, the RC64 can still keep the spoken lines clear and in front of you, rather than letting them get lost in the roar. One of the first practical things I tested was how the speaker handled a typical 7.1 home theater mix in a medium-sized room, about 250 square feet, with a standard rectangular layout and a modest amount of acoustic treatment. I paired the RC64 with a pair of Klipsch RP600M bookshelf front speakers, an SVS sub, and a modest AVR that supplies about 100 watts per channel into an 8-ohm load. The dialogue in The Social Network stayed razor-sharp, even during rapid back-and-forth exchanges. The speaker's mid sits slightly forward, which is exactly what you want from a center channel. It creates a virtual voice that seems to emanate from the screen rather than the speakers themselves. When I switched to a more bass-heavy movie like Mad Max, Fury Road, the RC64 held its own, but you could feel the need for a little extra headroom. The cerametallic woofers are efficient, but they aren't built for deep, booming low-frequency hits. That's where the subwoofer steps in, and the whole system remains balanced. If you're a gamer, the RC64's clarity shines in fast-paced shooters. I ran a few rounds of Call of Duty with a surround setup that used the RC64 for dialogue and in-game voice chat. Enemy footsteps and shouted commands were easy to locate, and the speaker didn't smear the higher-frequency gunfire. For music lovers, the speaker is less of a hi-fi reference and more of a home theater workhorse. It reproduces vocal tracks with authority, but you might notice a slight forward tilt on the upper mids, something that audiophiles who favor a neutral soundstage could find a touch aggressive. Now, let's talk about who should actually consider buying this piece. If you already own Klipsch front speakers or a Klipsch soundbar and you want the center to match that signature punch, the RC64 is a logical step. Its premium walnut veneer blends seamlessly with furniture, so it looks as good as it sounds in a living room that doubles as a media hub. It's also a solid pick for anyone building a dedicated home theater room where the speakers can sit a few feet from the screen, giving the horns directivity enough space to work without reflecting off nearby walls. The speaker's power handling works best with an AVR that can comfortably deliver 80,100 watts per channel. Underpowered amps will make the horn sound a bit harsh, especially during peaks. On the flip side, if you're on a tight budget, or if your main speakers are not Klipsch, you might be better off looking at a more neutral, lower-cost center that can blend without coloring the overall tone. Small apartments with limited speaker placement also pose a challenge. The horn's forward focus can bounce off close walls, creating a slight, ringing effect that some listeners find distracting. Additionally, the RC64's size isn't negligible. The cabinet measures over a foot wide and sits a few inches deep, so you'll need a decent amount of space below or beside your TV. If you're hoping to tuck a center speaker behind a thin TV stand, you could run into clearance issues. Another practical consideration is the amp requirement. The titanium compression driver is incredibly efficient, but it also likes a clean, well-damped power source. In my testing, an AVR with a built-in bass management that could send the low end to